In 2012, a 17-year-old girl named Jessica Evans was living with her mother, Kris. Just before summer vacation, she met 22-year-old Jacob Wheeler, who had recently moved across the street to his brother's house. They connected at a party and quickly developed a bond. Jacob was a quiet country boy who had recently returned from a 3-year stint in Iraq. Although he was 5 years older than Jessica, Kris felt reassured and trusted him. On August 26, 2012, Jessica asked Kris for permission to join Jacob on a night fishing trip at the Little Wabash River, a popular location. Initially hesitant, Kris eventually agreed after Jessica persuaded her, but insisted that Jessica be careful and return home by 5 a.m. She assured her mother that she understood and would return to her sister Megan's house at that time to babysit her nephew Miles. Little did she know that this fishing trip would be her last. Just before midnight, Kris called Jessica to check on her. Jessica assured her mother that she was fine and that she and Jacob were nearly done fishing and would be home soon. However, when Kris woke up at 5 the next morning, she realized that Jessica had not returned home. This was unusual, especially since Jessica had plans to babysit her nephew. Concerned, Kris tried calling Jessica's cell phone, but there was no answer. She also sent text messages that went unanswered. Kris felt something was wrong. She was sure Jessica would inform her if plans changed. Kris went to Jacob's house, but his brother Jeremy said that Jacob hadn't come home either. Jeremy wasn't worried because he believed Jacob could handle himself. However, by 9 a.m., Jessica's family was beginning to worry. Kris thought it was possible that Jacob's truck had broken down or that they were stuck somewhere. After 12 hours without any news about Jessica and Jacob, Kris contacted the White County Sheriff's Office for assistance. Sheriff Doug Meyer, who was relaxing at home, received the call but wasn't overly concerned. He speculated that Jessica and Jacob might have run away together and figured they were likely okay, but he needed to find out where they had gone. The sheriff decided to request a warrant to trace Jessica's cell phone, but that could take some time. Meanwhile, the sheriff's deputies followed the family's advice and headed to the spot where Jessica and Jacob were supposed to be fishing. The area was remote, accessible only by gravel roads. The deputies found a 50-foot-long overgrown path that led to a popular fishing location. They saw clear signs that someone had been there, such as abandoned packages, but there were no signs of any trouble or crime. An extinguished campfire was present, but the area was clean, and Jacob's truck was missing. However, the sheriff's intuition about Jessica and Jacob led him to believe that nothing serious had happened. It seemed like they were simply hanging out together. Eventually, the sheriff obtained records from Jessica's cell phone carrier to help track her phone. They discovered that the phone's signal was coming from a tower near the campground area where she and Jacob had been fishing. This indicated that Jessica's phone was still active and nearby, which contradicted the sheriff's assumption that she had simply run away. If Jessica and Jacob were still there, why weren't they answering their phones? Investigators began to worry that they might be stranded, injured, or worse. News of Jessica and Jacob's disappearance quickly spread through Norris City, raising alarms in the community. Some speculated that they had just run away, but Kris was confident that Jessica would not do that. Upon learning that Jessica's cell phone was still in the vicinity of the fishing site, the sheriff's office felt a growing sense of unease about the situation. At dawn the following day, officers from the White County Sheriff's Office, along with neighboring law enforcement and many volunteers, returned to the fishing area to search for any traces of Jacob and Jessica. Their families also joined in the search. However, after 3 hours, they had no leads. Neither Jacob nor Jessica nor their pickup truck was found. The pickup must have been at the scene if something had happened to them. But what if they had discarded their phones and fled? If they had indeed left together, they would eventually create an electronic footprint. The police also checked their bank card usage to see if there had been any transactions but found no activity. While there were no significant findings in the bank statements, one clue emerged from Jessica's phone records. The police were aware of the midnight call from Kris, but Jessica had another phone conversation shortly after, around 12:30 a.m. on Sunday night. Investigators identified the person she spoke with as a young man named Ron Wooderson. His name was familiar to the police due to his past legal issues, raising their suspicions about his involvement. Consequently, they decided to interview Ron to understand the details of their conversation. Sheriff's deputies met with Ron and asked him about his last interaction with Jessica. He eventually acknowledged that he called her late at night, stating he was at a party with friends. Ron claimed he wanted Jessica to join him at the party, but when she mentioned she was busy fishing, Jacob, her boyfriend, grabbed the phone. Ron explained that Jacob had explicitly prohibited him from calling Jessica, which led to a heated argument, primarily fueled by Jacob's anger over Ron contacting his girlfriend. The deputies recorded the names of other party attendees and verified Ron's alibi. They found that everyone else confirmed he did not leave the party after the call. By the end of the day, search volunteers were ready to go home without any leads. However, one of Jacob's friends, while riding an ATV, discovered a pickup truck hidden in the woods behind an old farmhouse, about 2 miles from where Jacob and Jessica had been fishing. It turned out to be Jacob's truck. The situation quickly became distressing when they found a woman's body in the back of the truck, shot twice in the head. Her condition raised further alarm. She was partially clothed, with some of her clothes strewn on the ground nearby. Investigators suspected that more than just a murder had occurred. The victim had no identification, but in such a tight-knit community, that was not a significant issue. Some of the investigators recognized Jessica from her entire life, and it became clear that they had just discovered her body. The discovery of Jessica's body marked a turning point. This suggested that she may have met with a man before her death and may have fought back. Authorities hoped that the coroner could obtain DNA evidence from the crime scene. The police searched the area around the pickup and found shell casings that matched the 2 wounds on Jessica's head. The casings were located on the right side of the truck, next to a large bloodstain, indicating that Jessica had been shot at that location. As investigators examined Jacob's pickup truck, which was filled with fishing gear and personal belongings, they noted that Jacob was missing. A crucial clue emerged when they discovered blood in the driver's side cab of the truck. Blood samples were sent for DNA testing to determine whose blood it was and to locate Jacob. Law enforcement began to consider Jacob as a potential suspect, questioning whether he was a victim himself or if he was responsible for Jessica's death. Community suspicions arose, with some believing that Jacob, a veteran, had the skills to commit murder. Speculation swirled that a late-night phone call from Ron might have triggered a violent reaction from Jacob. Investigators grew increasingly concerned about Jacob's mental state, particularly if he felt he was losing Jessica. The day after Jessica's body was found, the police obtained a search warrant for Jacob's brother's house, suspecting that Jacob might be hiding there. Although they didn't find him, they discovered that one of his guns was missing. Jeremy, Jacob's brother, said there was no reason to worry. Jacob had simply taken the gun for a fishing trip, which he considered normal. However, investigators became concerned when they learned that the missing gun was a .22, matching the shell casings found at the crime scene. Despite this, Jacob's family insisted he was innocent, believing that he would have put his life on the line to protect Jessica if she had been in danger. As the week went by, the search for Jacob intensified. Police from multiple counties joined forces, deploying search teams, K-9 units, and aerial surveillance to locate him. The White County Crime Suppression Unit even offered a $2,000 reward for information leading to Jacob's capture. This reward prompted several calls to the sheriff's office with tips, but one was particularly noteworthy. An employee at a gas station located 12 miles from where Jessica's body was found reported seeing Jacob buy a pack of cigarettes on Sunday night, about a day after he and Jessica disappeared. The employee noted that Jacob was wearing a camouflage hooded sweatshirt and recalled seeing an ID card in his wallet that appeared to belong to Jacob Wheeler. This made Jacob the primary suspect in Jessica's case. As time passed, it seemed increasingly likely that Jacob was on the run. Investigators visited the gas station to review surveillance footage, where they spotted a man in a hooded sweatshirt who partially obscured his face and avoided looking directly at the camera. Although it was a warm night and would have been uncomfortable in such attire, it was difficult to confirm with certainty that he was Jacob. The man quickly purchased cigarettes and left the store. While the footage from one camera did not reveal his face, a second camera outside captured him getting into a car driven by a woman, a person one of the sheriff's deputies recognized. Police quickly went to the woman's home, where they saw the car from the gas station video parked nearby. When questioned by investigators, the woman admitted to driving the man to the gas station but insisted he wasn't Jacob, claiming he was her boyfriend instead. This left the identity of the man in the video as a dead end, and all police attention turned back to Jacob. Detectives believed he was alive and suspected his brother Jeremy of hiding him. They searched his house at night to catch him off guard, but even after a second search, there was still no sign that he had been there. After Jacob disappeared, his brother and father were certain he had nothing to do with Jessica's death. His father, Harold, was determined to prove his son's innocence. He believed he was searching for Jacob's body, not the body of his son. 6 days later, Sheriff Doug Meyer received a call from Harold, who mentioned that he had discovered something that others had overlooked. He believed he saw car parts in a wooded area just a quarter-mile from where Jacob and Jessica were camping. Investigators decided to follow up on this lead and found some car parts, specifically pieces that belonged to the fender of a pickup truck. The area where the parts were located showed damage to the trees, indicating that a pickup truck had driven into the woods and through the trees, causing damage. However, it was clear that these were not Jacob's truck. While the connection to the crime was unclear, the discovery piqued investigators' interest as they had no other leads. One of the car parts had a serial number, which the police were able to look up online to determine the specific model of the pickup truck. In a small town, it's relatively easy to track down such a vehicle. One of the sheriff's deputies was familiar with a man named Danny Costin, a 36-year-old electrician from White County, who drove a similar truck. But could he be involved in a violent crime? Danny had never caused trouble, had no criminal record, and was a well-known member of the community. Investigators decided to visit his workplace to speak with him. They found his pickup truck in the parking lot, which had considerable damage consistent with the parts discovered in the woods. As the investigator examined the pickup truck, Sheriff Doug Meyer questioned Danny about the damage. Danny explained that he had gone fishing on the Little Wabash River but had difficulty launching his boat because he was very drunk. He couldn't remember much from that night, but he did recall that it had been around 1 a.m. on the same night that Jacob and Jessica went fishing. He insisted that he didn't see anyone else in the area during his time there. Meanwhile, investigators made a significant discovery. They found a considerable amount of blood in the back of Danny's pickup truck. He was visibly shocked when they informed him about it. The sheriff advised Danny that if he had anything to share, he should do so now. Danny then revealed that he had been in the woods that night and had witnessed Jacob attack Jessica twice. However, this account did not clarify why there was blood in his truck. Forensic analysis confirmed it was human blood. Investigators took Danny to the police station for further questioning. He reiterated that he was drunk, went to the Little Wabash River, and encountered Jacob and Jessica. He mentioned that Jacob had gone into the woods, leaving him alone with Jessica. Danny claimed that Jessica had come on to him of her own accord. He said they went to his truck and parked 2 miles away behind an abandoned farmhouse. According to him, they had consensual intimate contact until Jacob found them in the dark. An argument broke out between Jacob and Jessica, during which Jacob attacked her. Danny stated that he felt scared when Jacob approached him, leading to a struggle during which the gun went off, injuring Jacob. He claimed this shot was accidental. In a panic, he placed Jacob in the back of his pickup truck, worried that no one would believe his story of self-defense, so he concealed the body where it wouldn't be found. Danny provided detailed information about where he had left Jacob's body. The police were skeptical of Danny's story, as it did not align with Jessica's character. His account of how Jessica willingly came with him, only for Jacob to show up unexpectedly, seemed implausible. Ultimately, it was determined that he had attacked Jacob, thus confirming the suspicions held by Jacob's family. Consequently, Danny Costin was arrested. Investigators followed Danny's directions to find Jacob's body, venturing deeper into the woods along a dirt road. After 6 days of searching, they discovered Jacob's body with a bullet wound in his head. Forensic evidence contradicted Danny's claims. Blood found in Jacob's pickup truck, which belonged to Jacob, did not align with Danny's narrative. He had previously stated that he placed Jacob's body in his own truck, raising questions about the source of the blood. During a reinterrogation, inconsistencies in Danny's account led him to admit the truth. He explained that he attempted to drive his truck to launch a boat, but, being very drunk and faced with dense woods, he sought help from Jacob and Jessica. Although Jacob advised against it because of Danny's intoxication, they eventually agreed to help him. After climbing into the back of Jacob's truck, Danny, armed with a pistol, unexpectedly shot Jacob in the head through the driver's side window, in full view of Jessica, who was terrified and screamed. Danny then pulls Jacob out of the truck, saying he has no idea why he shot Jacob or what his next actions will be. Jessica begs Danny to spare her life, which prompts the sheriff to ask if she will agree to intimacy in exchange for her safety. Danny interpreted her desperate plea for self-preservation as an offer, and he proceeded to assault her in the back of Jacob's truck. Despite her begging, he shot her, asserting afterward that he did not know why he committed these acts. Afterward, he transported Jessica's body in Jacob's truck, driving to Wayne County to hide Jacob's body while discarding both his gun and Jacob's gun out of the window during the trip. The police have never recovered either firearm. On September 4, 2012, Danny appeared in court and pleaded not guilty. He later changed his testimony, claiming he had not been informed of his rights before questioning, but an appeals court dismissed his appeal. Video evidence from the interrogation showed that he was indeed read his rights. Additionally, police had strong evidence linking Danny to the crime. His truck contained Jacob's blood, and DNA from Jessica was found on his body. In January 2014, Candace Brown, Danny's girlfriend, was found guilty of lying to the authorities during the initial investigation. She had provided him with a false alibi. She was sentenced to 60 days in jail, 30 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, and was required to pay various court fees and fines. On August 20, 2013, Danny Costin was convicted and sentenced to 53 years in prison. Judge Tom Foster stated he was constrained by the plea agreement between the state and defense but believed Danny deserved a harsher sentence. Danny had agreed to waive a jury trial in return for lesser charges and a potentially reduced sentence if found guilty. Judge Foster noted that the court accepted this deal only with the consent of Jessica's and Jacob's families. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Valerie Pride. Valerie Pride was born on March 9, 1958, and grew up in Arizona with her 5 brothers and 1 sister, which contributed to her strong and determined character. She attended South Mountain High School, where she gained a reputation for her intelligence and ambition. After graduating, she aimed to continue her education at Arizona State University, driven to create a better future for herself. During her high school years, Valerie fell in love with a young man named Jimmy Pride. Their romance flourished, and in 1974, they got married. Just a year later, they welcomed their first daughter, Shansha. In 1977, their family expanded again with the birth of their second daughter, Duana. Despite being a young mother, Valerie continued to pursue her ambitions. She aspired to become an electrician, a profession that was predominantly male at the time, and she did not let anything stand in her way. By the time Duana was born, Valerie had been accepted into a job training program sponsored by the United Electrical Workers, a rare and competitive opportunity. She made history by becoming the first black female electrician at the Palo Verde nuclear plant, all while caring for her 2 young children. Her life was a delicate balance of motherhood, work, and being a trailblazer in her industry. However, Valerie faced challenges in her personal life as well. Her marriage to Jimmy eventually ended in divorce. Even so, she remained strong, focusing on her career and her children, and trying to give them the best life possible. After the divorce, Valerie found new love with Ben Daniels, a co-worker at the nuclear power plant. Ben also had children from a previous marriage, and as their relationship deepened, they began planning for their future together. Although they appear perfect on the outside, their relationship is actually unstable. Valerie's sister, Vicki McDonald, revealed that Ben's past was negatively affecting their relationship. Vicky mentioned that Ben would often reassure Valerie that he had everything under control. Despite these issues, Valerie maintained her faith in Ben and their future, and before long, the two took a big step forward in their relationship together. In 1982, Valerie and Ben decided to purchase a new home in a quiet area of South Phoenix, Arizona. This marked a significant milestone in their lives. They selected a newly constructed Spanish-style home, imagining it as a place for a new beginning. Meanwhile, Valerie was finishing her final year of training to become an electrician, nearing a career breakthrough. After her divorce, she had found love again, and now they had a new home to create memories with their daughters. Everything seemed to be going very well. Sometimes, life's most promising moments can disappear in an instant. Just weeks after moving into their new home, tragedy struck unexpectedly. Labor Day weekend in 1982 began like any other for Valerie and her daughters. It was meant to be a time for relaxation, family bonding, and simple pleasures. But on Monday, September 6th, what started as a normal day turned horrific. At around 4 p.m., Ben received a call that no parent ever wants to hear. His 9-year-old daughter from a previous relationship had had an epileptic seizure while bathing. Her mother was with her but had stepped out for a minute. In that short time, the little girl suffered a seizure and submerged underwater. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors battled to save her, but by the time Ben arrived, it was too late. His daughter had been pronounced dead. While Ben was at the hospital dealing with an unimaginable loss, Valerie and her daughters were at home, completely unaware of the situation. In a time before cell phones, Valerie had no quick way to contact Ben or find out what was happening, so she had to wait for him to call her. Around 9:30 that evening, Valerie spoke on the phone with Ben's brother. This call became her last known contact with anyone outside her home. They spoke for about 10 minutes, focusing on the condition of Ben's daughter in the hospital. During the conversation, there was a knock on the front door of Valerie's house. She informed Ben's brother that she needed to hang up to answer the door, as Ben was not home. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Neither she nor Ben's brother realized that this would be their final conversation. At around 10 p.m., after several hours in the hospital, Ben returned home, exhausted and grieving the loss of his daughter. He just wanted to get some rest. However, as he neared his house, he noticed something was wrong. The front door was slightly ajar, which was unusual, especially in the Arizona summer when everyone kept their doors closed to maintain cool air indoors. Ben carefully pushed the door open and stepped inside, where he saw a horrifying sight: blood everywhere. Valerie and her 2 daughters, Shansha and Duana, had been murdered. They had been brutally attacked in the living room, just a few feet apart. 8-year-old Shantia and 4-year-old Duana lay lifeless in the living room, their small bodies covered in blood. Valerie was also found dead near the kitchen, her body soaked in blood. The home they had just moved into, where they hoped to start anew, had turned into a scene of unimaginable violence. Ben's screams echoed through the night. Overwhelmed with grief, he collapsed, crying out so loudly that neighbors rushed outside to see what was happening. Unable to help, the neighbors called the police, as Ben was too devastated to do anything but mourn. For any parent, losing a child is an indescribable pain, but returning home to find one's entire family slaughtered is simply beyond comprehension. When the police arrived, even the most experienced officers struggled to comprehend the scene before them. Many described it as the most horrific crime scene they had ever encountered. Blood was everywhere, covering the floors and walls. Shansha and Duana were discovered huddled together in the living room near a love seat, still in their pajamas, which suggested that they were preparing for bed when the attack occurred. Valerie was found in the dining area close to the kitchen, her body just a few feet from the back door, as if she had been trying to escape. There were no signs of forced entry at the crime scene, indicating that the killer either had permission to enter or managed to get in without breaking anything. The police began to consider a disturbing possibility when they learned about a knock at the door during Valerie's last phone call. The person who knocked might have been the one responsible for the horrific crime. Furthermore, it was revealed that the suspect had not stayed in the house after the murders, they exited through the back door and jumped over the fence, vanishing into the night. The murders were initially believed to be the result of a robbery gone wrong, but that theory was quickly dismissed. There were no signs of forced entry, no stolen items, and no evidence of an intruder. Instead, they discovered a scene of shocking violence. Someone had entered the home with the singular purpose of committing murder. The pressing question for investigators was, who would want to kill a young mother and her children in such a brutal manner? Time was critical, as a dangerous killer was still on the loose, and they needed to apprehend him before he could strike again. That night, the neighborhood was quiet, but one person had noticed something unusual. As police officers searched the area, a neighbor mentioned hearing a loud argument coming from Valerie's home around 9:45 p.m., but thought it was just a typical family disagreement. When they looked outside, they saw nothing, no suspicious individuals, no signs of trouble, and nothing that seemed alarming. An hour later, at 11 p.m., Valerie's ex-husband, Jimmy Pride, arrived at the house. When the officers informed him that his daughters had been murdered, he collapsed on the pavement, screaming in anguish, just like Ben had. He couldn't contain his emotions, writhing in pain and sobbing. The anguish was so intense that the police had to intervene by force to calm him down. Meanwhile, behind the house, there was a bloody handprint on the wooden fence. This was clear evidence that the murderer had escaped by climbing over the fence and disappearing into the darkness, likely through the yard of a nearby abandoned home. But whose handprint was it, and what kind of person could commit such a brutal act? The investigation took a more disturbing turn when detectives learned that Valerie's family had only recently moved into the neighborhood. They had been there for just a few weeks, barely enough time to make friends, let alone enemies. No one truly knew them, yet someone wanted them dead. Detectives searched for answers by examining Valerie's life. They investigated her social relationships, her family, and sought any signs of a possible enemy. However, as they delved deeper, the truth became increasingly troubling. There was nothing to uncover. Valerie had no history of conflict, no long-standing grudges, and no background suggesting that she would meet a violent end. She was a devoted mother and lived an ordinary life. Yet, someone had violently disrupted that life in a horrific manner. Autopsies revealed that both Valerie and her two daughters, Shansha and Duana, had been attacked multiple times. Notably, there was no evidence of abuse, which eliminated one possible motive, but it did not bring them any closer to solving the case. With each passing day, the investigation stalled, unanswered questions continued to accumulate, and the town was left in a state of fear. On September 10, 1982, Valerie and her daughters were buried, but their funerals were filled with tension. The community was haunted by the reality that a killer remained at large. Detectives then discovered an unusual clue. A month before the murders, Valerie and Ben's home had been broken into. Initially, it appeared to be a simple burglary, but the details were alarming. The intruder rummaged through the house and also slashed their water bed. Disturbingly, they took Valerie's clothes and tossed them into the water, indicating a personal motive. It was clear that this was not a simple thief looking for valuables, but rather an enemy who wanted to send a message. Could this have been a threat? Did Valerie unknowingly encounter someone dangerous? Investigators were eager to find connections, but the case hit another dead end. The culprit had disappeared without a trace. As months went by, what seemed like promising leads faded away. Numerous tips came in, each one offering the possibility of a breakthrough, but none brought the detectives any closer to solving the case. What once felt urgent was now growing cold. As the situation became tense, rumors began to spread throughout the town, accompanied by various theories, such as ghosts in the night. One particularly chilling theory suggested that the recent murders were linked to the tragic death of Ben's daughter. Some residents speculated that Valerie and her daughters were murdered as a twisted form of revenge. Ben's 9-year-old daughter had died in an accident, leading some to believe that someone held Valerie responsible for it. However, investigators later clarified that the girl had suffered an epileptic seizure and had drowned, with the autopsy confirming that there was no foul play involved. Despite this, rumors continued to thrive, contributing to the growing anxiety in the town. As the one-year anniversary of the murders approaches, detectives have not yet found any new leads. The murders of Valerie and her daughters shocked the community, and investigators are still searching for information, but to no avail. Valerie's union and the Silent Witness program have offered a $2,000 reward, yet no significant evidence has been uncovered so far. In August 1983, the case took an unexpected turn. Police announced that a suspect had been arrested, and the news quickly spread throughout the town, raising hopes that justice would be served. What surprised everyone, however, was that the suspect was only 14 years old and still a high school student. Authorities also disclosed that they were searching for two other suspects, one juvenile and one adult, believed to be involved in the murders. The police suspected that the murder might have been an act of revenge for the death of Ben's daughter, a theory that had been discussed but never confirmed. The arrested teenager was believed to be related to Ben's daughter. Could Valerie have been blamed for the child's death? Was there a deep-seated resentment that led to something violent? This idea was frightening, but it raised more questions than it answered. If Ben's daughter's death was considered an accident, why would anyone blame Valerie for it? And if the motive was revenge, why target her daughters as well? It was confusing, and even the investigators were skeptical. Just when it seemed that a motive had been identified, the case became more complicated. Within 24 hours of the arrest, the 14-year-old was released. The district attorney decided not to file charges, stating that more investigation was necessary. The evidence the detectives had was not strong enough to support a case in court. Two other potential suspects were never arrested, no charges, no answers. The case, which had briefly reignited interest, went cold again. 2 years later, a neighbor found a surprising clue, a knife buried in a backyard. It closely resembled the one thought to have been used in the murders. Investigators quickly sent it to the crime lab, hoping it might finally provide a breakthrough. But once again, optimism turned into disappointment. The knife was tested for DNA, but there were no matches, no evidence linking it to Valerie, Shansha, or Duana. It was yet another dead end in a case that continued to be a mystery. As the years passed, the detectives never gave up on the case. They meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence, interviewed over 1,000 people, and followed every lead, but they still couldn't identify the killer or their motive. By 2012, investigators admitted that they had exhausted all possibilities and needed the public's help, believing that someone had vital information. They were convinced that this was a deeply personal crime. The perpetrator had entered Valerie's family home with the sole intention of committing murder. Now, more than 40 years later, the case remains unsolved. The brutal murders of Valerie, Shansha, and Duana continue to haunt the community, leaving an emotional scar that won't heal. Investigators think that someone close to Valerie might hold the key to the truth. But how could someone capable of such brutality carry on as if nothing had happened? Do they feel remorse? Do they ever worry about being caught? Or have they convinced themselves that they got away with murder? In recent years, advancements in forensic technology have allowed detectives to revisit the evidence. DNA collected from the crime scene has been submitted to a national database, raising hopes for a breakthrough. However, even if the killer is eventually identified, no explanation will ever make sense. Nothing can justify the horrific act of killing an innocent mother and her two young daughters. This crime epitomizes senseless violence. Valerie, Shansha, and Duana did not deserve what happened to them. Regardless of how much time has passed, one thing is clear: those capable of such a terrible act must be held accountable. Valerie Pride's life was a testament to resilience, ambition, and a profound love for her two daughters, Shansha and Duana. She was determined to pursue a stellar career as the first Black electrician at the Palo Verde nuclear power plant and to build a new life with Ben Daniels in South Phoenix. However, on Labor Day weekend in 1982, her family's dreams and future were brutally snatched away in a horrific act of violence. More than 40 years later, the mystery of who killed them and why remains unsolved, leaving a lasting pain in the community. Despite advances in forensic science, nothing can erase the tragedy that claimed the lives of an innocent mother and her two young daughters. Crystal McDowell was born on October 26, 1979, in Baytown, Texas. Her childhood was challenging, as her parents, Pamela Sue Surratt and Anthony Paul Tony Walters, struggled with addiction, leading to an unstable home life. Tragically, she lost both parents to apparent overdoses by the age of 11. After their deaths, she was raised by her grandmother and later by her uncle, Jeff Walters. Despite these hardships, she was known for her vibrant smile, striking blue eyes, and uplifting personality. Crystal pursued a career as a flight attendant, where her adventurous spirit thrived as she traveled across the country. During her journey, she met Stephen Wayne McDowell, who was 7 years older than she. Described as gentle and soft-spoken despite his large stature, Stephen won Crystal's heart. They married in April 2007 after dating for a while. He had a daughter from a previous marriage and worked as a shipping manager, but he struggled to maintain stable employment, which forced Crystal to become the primary breadwinner. While she excelled in her career, Stephen's professional instability created tension in their relationship, especially concerning her frequent travels. As jealousy grew, Stephen began to suspect Crystal of having affairs during her flights, despite the lack of evidence of infidelity. Friends noted that Crystal valued her family and sought stability, given her difficult past. In 2016, after 15 successful years as a flight attendant, she decided to leave and join her family's real estate business. This shift allowed her to spend more time with her children and provided a sense of stability. Her uncle Jeff was proud to welcome her into the third generation of their real estate legacy. Crystal quickly excelled in her new role, being recognized for her charm, professionalism, and dedication. However, she confided in close friends that this career change also served a strategic purpose, as she believed it would help her secure custody of her children if she and Stephen divorced. By February 2017, Crystal's marriage had deteriorated significantly, prompting her to file for divorce due to years of emotional distress. On March 20th, she called 911, claiming Stephen had threatened her and their children. The authorities responded but treated the case as a precaution rather than a criminal incident. At that time, there were no custody arrangements, allowing Stephen to legally be with his children. Although officers attempted to contact him, they were unsuccessful. A few days later, Stephen returned the children, and Crystal chose not to press charges, opting instead to focus on reducing tension for the sake of their kids. Crystal's friends commented that she tried her best to keep the divorce amicable, putting the happiness of her children first. Stephen's adult daughter was troubled by this incident and questioned her father about his behavior. He expressed anger over alleged affairs that Crystal had during their marriage, accusations that those close to her dismissed as false. Many who knew them recognized that their relationship had been toxic for years, and even Stephen's daughter acknowledged that, while she and Crystal had a great relationship, the marriage had always been unstable. Although their divorce was finalized in June 2017 and appeared to be friendly, especially since Crystal helped Stephen find and purchase a new home while renovating her own, issues beneath the surface remained unresolved. Crystal often asked her family not to mention their plans or outings to Stephen, fearing his unpredictable reactions. Even simple activities, like spending time with a friend, could set him off. Despite being legally divorced, Stephen seemed unable or unwilling to accept the situation. His social media activity displayed a concerning trend. Shortly after the divorce, he changed his profile picture to a tombstone, then to an image of Santa Muerte, and later reverted to a photo of himself with Crystal. His post suggested an image of a happy family. Meanwhile, Crystal continued to emotionally support Stephen, checking in on him regularly. He claimed to be adjusting to the separation and focusing on his life, but his behavior suggested otherwise. One of Crystal's aunts noticed that Stephen frequently posted pictures of himself bringing Crystal coffee in bed, as if their relationship was still going strong. In an effort to maintain a harmonious co-parenting relationship, Crystal planned a trip with Stephen and the kids, but their intimacy only blurred the lines further. Then, in August 2017, things shifted. Crystal, now 37, met Paul Hargrave, a local jeweler and fellow single parent. Paul was charming, ambitious, and shared Crystal's passion for travel and adventure. Their relationship developed quickly, and for the first time in a long time, Crystal felt truly happy. Although she wanted to tell her family about Paul, she asked them to keep it a secret until she found the right time to inform Stephen, still fearful of his reaction. However, that fear didn't stop her from publicly sharing her happiness. On August 23rd, she posted on social media that she had never felt so joyful and that her heart was filled with a happiness she never thought possible. Just 2 days later, on August 25th, Hurricane Harvey approached. Crystal woke up at Paul's house, preparing to face the storm and fulfill her responsibilities for the day. At 7:01 a.m., she texted Stephen to ask if he had collected clean water for the kids and informed him that she was heading to his house to take shelter with them. She intended to visit a property afterward for a showing. Paul's security cameras recorded the last known images of Crystal that morning, first in the kitchen, then walking outside in heels, holding her phone, as she got into her black Mercedes-Benz. She was never seen again. Later that day, Crystal's uncle Jeff became worried. They were close, working together in real estate and communicating frequently. He tried calling her several times to let her know that a scheduled showing had been canceled because of the storm. When she didn't answer, Jeff contacted Stephen, who sent a suspicious text, allegedly from Crystal's phone, at 9:30 a.m., stating that she planned to pick up the kids and go to Dallas. Jeff was immediately suspicious. Crystal never changed her plans without informing him, and her phone was essential for her work. Things didn't add up, and fearing something was wrong, he reported her missing to the police before noon on August 26th. As floodwaters from Hurricane Harvey swept through Houston, Jeff and 2 family members confronted Stephen. Stephen claimed Crystal hadn't been to his house in over a week, but his daughter told Jeff that she had hugged her mother the day before. That same day, a sheriff's deputy conducted a welfare check at Stephen's home. Inside, authorities discovered Crystal's black dress in the washing machine, along with her purse and handbag, clear evidence that she had recently been there. For her uncle Jeff, who had helped raise her, it was evident that Stephen was involved in her disappearance. Unfortunately, at the time, Hurricane Harvey had devastated the area, and many law enforcement officers and first responders were focused on rescue efforts in flooded neighborhoods. Consequently, the investigation stalled almost immediately. Desperate for answers, Jeff decided to reach out to the media to raise awareness and search for clues. However, his efforts were overshadowed by the constant news coverage of the storm. After days of no progress, Jeff hired a private investigator, feeling frustrated with the silence of local authorities. This decision sparked backlash. The local police chief and district attorney opposed the involvement of an outside investigator in Crystal's case, arguing that crucial evidence could be compromised. This resulted in increased tensions between Crystal's family, law enforcement, and the local media in Houston. Unwilling to give up, Jeff teamed up with Crystal's new boyfriend, Paul, to offer a $15,000 reward for credible information. They launched a social media campaign that ultimately attracted public attention. However, the investigators began to suspect not only Stephen but also Jeff and Paul. Although Jeff was tirelessly searching for Crystal, law enforcement remained skeptical of him. Rumors about his personal life, including his same-sex relationships, spread throughout the town of Baytown, leading some to believe that these biases influenced how authorities perceived his involvement. The local police commander dismissed Jeff's concerns during a national broadcast, labeling him as overly emotional and a hindrance to the investigation. Paul was also scrutinized. After taking a polygraph test with inconclusive results, his credibility came into question. Things worsened when he sent surveillance footage from his home to news outlets instead of directly giving it to the police. Paul defended his actions by stating that he initially tried to share the videos with the sheriff's office but felt ignored, prompting him to go public to clear his name. Then there was Stephen. Even though he displayed manipulative behavior, threatening self-harm if Crystal left him, investigators perceived him as polite, helpful, and cooperative. However, family and friends described the marriage as deeply unhealthy and controlling. Authorities did not see Stephen as a potential threat or a vengeful ex-husband. This perspective began to shift on Tuesday, August 29th, as floodwaters receded. A family friend discovered Crystal's black Mercedes-Benz parked outside a dilapidated motel, an area highlighted during their online campaign. The doors were unlocked, and the keys were still in the ignition. Investigators suspect the car was staged as a burglary, but flooding has made it difficult to access. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed Crystal's car entering the motel lot at 6:37 a.m. on August 26, the day she disappeared. Just 5 hours later, Stephen was seen on camera at a nearby gas station. He did not purchase gas. Instead, he drove toward the motel, seemingly checking to see if the car was still there. Even more unsettling, other footage captured a hooded figure resembling Stephen riding a bicycle through the rain near the motel that same morning. The evidence was accumulating, and for the first time, attention turned to Stephen, not as a grieving ex-husband but as a potential suspect in a case that had gone too long without resolution. The investigation took a significant turn when surveillance footage from a Walmart, situated just across the highway from the motel where Crystal's car was discovered, showed a man who looked like Stephen buying a bicycle early on the morning of August 26, 2017. He paid with cash, and the timing matched the sighting of a hooded figure on a bike near the scene. Despite this troubling evidence, he denied being involved in Crystal's disappearance. As authorities indicated they lacked direct evidence, they allowed him to go home with his children. Crystal's family was outraged. Her uncle, Jeff, pointed out to the district attorney that Crystal had previously reported that Stephen had threatened to harm their children if she left him. Jeff was convinced of Stephen's emotional and mental instability. It wasn't until September 8, nearly 2 weeks after Crystal vanished, that the district attorney intervened. The children were placed in protective custody, and Stephen was brought in for questioning. However, Stephen controlled the situation. He requested to return home for one last night to organize things and promised to confess the next day. Jeff and other family members were angry, fearing that this unsupervised time might allow Stephen to harm himself and evade justice. On September 9, 2017, Stephen returned to the police station and confessed. He told investigators that during a heated argument, Crystal had told him she would be taking her new boyfriend, Paul, on a family trip instead of him. Due to this, he became enraged. While their children slept upstairs, he attacked Crystal from behind and strangled her to death. Afterward, Stephen wrapped her body in a blanket, placed it in the trunk of his car, and drove before sunrise to a wooded area near his home, where he disposed of her remains. Even after confessing, he still refused to reveal the location of the body unless the prosecutors agreed not to pursue the death penalty. Due to the damage caused by Hurricane Harvey and the time that had passed, authorities worried that they wouldn't find the body without his assistance, so they accepted his terms. Later that day, Stephen guided authorities to a remote, overgrown area, and Crystal's remains were discovered in an advanced state of decomposition. Stephen McDowell, who was 44 at the time, was charged with first-degree murder, and bail was set at $500,000, which he could not afford. In addition to the issues of jealousy and anger, the case also highlights a more terrifying truth. Without Crystal, Stephen would have no financial resources to support himself and his children. The pursuit of justice moved slowly, as the trial did not commence until June 2019. During this time, Stephen displayed no remorse in court. He tried to create the impression that he was a man suffering from pain, claiming he acted out of a sudden fit of passion, a defense strategy in Texas that could significantly lessen his punishment if accepted. He also suggested that Crystal's death was the result of a consensual encounter that went awry. However, the prosecution effectively countered this narrative, highlighting the ongoing emotional abuse and control he had imposed during their relationship. Stephen's defense team attempted to tarnish Crystal's reputation by presenting unverified text messages and claims that she had been unfaithful. However, her friends and family stood up for her, describing her as a vibrant and loving person dedicated to her children. They also shared experiences of the years of dysfunction and manipulation she endured. One of the most heart-wrenching moments during the trial occurred when Mandy Avalos, Crystal's lifelong friend and guardian of her children, took the stand. She recounted a painful revelation in December 2017, when Stephen and Crystal's 5-year-old daughter shared a secret. The girl recalled the morning her mother went missing. She had heard her parents arguing. After hearing the commotion, she walked from the bathroom into the bedroom, where she witnessed her father pushing her mother onto the bed and covering her mouth and nose with his hand. She stood at the edge of the bed and watched until her mother stopped moving. Afterwards, her father took her upstairs and told her not to speak about what she had seen. Mandy quickly reported the incident to the authorities, and she was placed in a trauma counseling program, but the emotional scars continued to haunt her. Another important witness for the prosecution was Melissa Cherry, Crystal's cousin and close friend. Melissa testified about helping Crystal move out of her home when her conflicts with Stephen escalated. Melissa later supported her move back home after Stephen threatened to harm himself if she did not return. Cherry recounted that even after the divorce, he continued to emotionally manipulate Crystal, including starving himself to make her feel responsible for his health. The day after Crystal went missing, Melissa and Jeff visited Stephen's house, where they found him looking anxious, shaking, and in tears. The daughter of Crystal and Stephen claimed that she had seen her mother the day before and pointed to a black dress in the closet in a concerning manner, saying that evil spirits had taken her away. This disturbing scene prompted Melissa and Jeff to call the police from outside the house, urgently requesting that they remove Stephen from the children's lives, but their requests were ignored. Melissa also shared her account of a family cruise that Stephen had suggested as a way to say goodbye peacefully. Although Crystal hesitantly agreed, she made it clear that there would be no threats, manipulation, or harm involved. However, as the trip approached, an argument over finances led her to cancel, realizing that Stephen was not genuinely trying to say goodbye but was instead attempting to win her back. The most troubling testimony came from an inmate who had shared a cell with Stephen and claimed that Stephen confessed in detail to killing Crystal. According to the inmate, the motive was a text message from another man. He described how Stephen admitted to using zip ties to bind Crystal's hands after her death, information only known to the forensic team. Officials from the Texas Department of Public Safety corroborated parts of Stephen's confession, stating that he claimed Crystal had arrived early on the morning of August 25, 2017. They had an argument, during which she told him that she had never really loved him. She encouraged him to move on with his life. In a fit of rage, he strangled her in the bedroom. The 5-day trial concluded quickly. The jury found Stephen McDowell guilty of first-degree murder in just 3.5 hours. On September 10, 2019, he received a sentence of 50 years in prison, with a requirement to serve at least 25 years before being eligible for parole, potentially allowing for his release in 2042. Crystal's family was heartbroken by what they perceived as a light sentence. Her uncle Jeff exclaimed in court that Stephen deserved a harsher punishment, while others expressed frustration, advocating for a life sentence or the death penalty. However, those options were not available due to the agreement Stephen made in exchange for revealing the location of Crystal's body. The family's main concern was not the length of the prison sentence but rather the emotional impact on the children. Despite being surrounded by love, they faced a devastating loss. Crystal had dedicated her life to them, and now they were left to cope with trauma that many adults would struggle to endure. By 2020, Mandy, who had taken in the children immediately after Crystal's murder, was working to adopt them legally. Some sources indicate that Mandy was Crystal's best friend from childhood, while others suggest they may have had a romantic relationship at one time. Regardless of their history, Mandy was Crystal's most trusted confidant and was committed to caring for the children. Now that you know the complete story, we would love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe Stephen McDowell received the justice he deserved? Please share your opinion in the comments. We are reading all of them.